Welcome everybody, thanks for joining the webinar. Today's focus is the Nasdaq 100 index, which you may also know as the US Tech 100. Just a brief introduction on me for those that haven't seen me before. My name is Chris Ashton. I am the head mentor at the Corellian Academy. My background is in trading, where I worked at UBS and then Barclays for 20 years. And since leaving, I deliver content on what is happening in financial markets. And as you can imagine, technology stocks and the Nasdaq 100 index feature regularly in my daily commentaries. Now, I have partnered with Plus500 on several of these webinars to help increase your knowledge of the CFDs and tools that are available to you on their platform. Videos of these past webinars are available to watch on the Plus500 YouTube channel, and we have covered the S&P 500 index, oil, gold, Bitcoin, and technical analysis techniques, to name just a few of them. So if you like this webinar, feel free to catch up on these other recordings. I think you will find them useful and informative. Now, let's look at what we'll be discussing in today's webinar. First, I will briefly run through some of the important facts about the Nasdaq 100 index. Next, I'll identify some of the general drivers that could influence its price when you are trading it. Then I'll discuss volatility within the index and outline some things traders can do to navigate these volatile markets. From this point, I'll run through a case study of the Nasdaq 100 from early August, and then I'll finish the presentation by highlighting some of the key events later in September that are likely to influence the direction of the Nasdaq 100 moving forward. If you do have any questions, please feel free to put them on the Q&A section of the Zoom webinar, and either I will answer them at the end of the presentation, or for any specific Plus500 platform questions, a member of the customer service team will come back to you later in the week. Okay, let's move on. So what is the Nasdaq 100 index? The Nasdaq 100 index that you see on your Plus500 platform is a CFD based on the Nasdaq 100 index futures. The Nasdaq 100 is a key index for tracking the performance of major growth-orientated companies, particularly in the technology sector, and it often serves as a benchmark for the broader US stock market. Now, the index is designed to represent the performance of the largest and most actively traded stocks on the Nasdaq exchange, excluding financial institutions like banks and investment firms. If we look at the sector breakdown of the index and the companies associated with each sector, you will see the majority of companies in this Nasdaq 100 are in the technology sector. These include major tech firms like Apple, Microsoft, Alphabet, Meta Platforms, and Nvidia. Now, the second largest sector is consumer discretionary, which includes companies involved in retail, entertainment, and online services. Notable companies in this sector are Amazon, Netflix, and Tesla. Now, the healthcare sector ensures biotech and pharmaceutical companies are also well represented. Examples include Biogen and Moderna. Now, other popular well-known companies that traders follow are represented in the consumer staples sector. These are companies producing goods for consumers to use, such as PepsiCo, Amgen, and Kraft Heinz. Now, as of August the 30th, the total value of the Nasdaq 100 index stood at $25.5 trillion, which, when compared to the biggest index in the US, which is the S&P 500, which is valued at $46.9 trillion, you can see that it stacks up quite well. Okay, let's move on and look at some of the key drivers of the Nasdaq 100, the things that really make the index move. Now, these can be split into four general categories, all of which are important considerations when you're planning any trade. The first category focuses on the performance of major technology companies. Now, the Nasdaq 100 is market capitalization weighted, meaning it's heavily influenced by its largest constituents, most notably those biggest companies in the world, the mega tech stocks. You may have heard of them described as the Magnificent Seven. And that's Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, Meta Platforms, Tesla, and Nvidia. The performance of these companies can significantly sway the index because, as you can see from the table on screen now, they hold a substantial weight in the overall index composition. The success or failure of new product launches, innovations, and technological advancements from these companies will drive their individual stock prices, and with it have a knock-on impact for the Nasdaq 100 index. Now, the next category is macroeconomic factors, primarily interest rates, economic growth, and inflation. The interest rates decisions of the Federal Reserve, or Fed for short, and that's the US central bank, have a significant impact on the Nasdaq 100. Technology and growth-orientated companies tend to be sensitive to interest rate changes as they borrow and invest to grow faster. So, as a general rule, lower interest rates typically benefit these companies by reducing borrowing costs and increasing the potential upside of future earnings growth, while higher interest rates can have the opposite effect. Under the economic growth heading, economic indicators such as GDP growth, employment data like the non-farm payrolls release, and consumer spending updates can also influence the index. Positive economic updates often lead to increased consumer and business spending, which benefits the companies in the Nasdaq 100, while negative data can lead to declines. Inflation, such as the Consumer Price Index or PCE index, which is the Fed's preferred gauge of inflation, can affect the valuation of growth stocks, as higher inflation might lead to increases in interest rates, which can reduce the attractiveness of future earnings. This was the environment for the Nasdaq 100 during 2022 and early 2023, but that has flipped in 2024 as US inflation has fallen. And recently, the Fed chairman, Jerome Powell, has signaled interest rate cuts are on the way in September. Now, you can use your Plus500 platform to find out when all these economic indicators are released. To access the economic calendar, click Menu, go to Tools, then go to Economic Calendar. And here you can see the economic data for any given day, including key central bank meetings like the next Fed interest rate decision, which is on September the 18th. Now, category 3 is technology sector specific trends. As I've shown, the Nasdaq 100 index is dominated by technology companies. So trends in this sector, such as the adoption of cloud computing, artificial intelligence, and cybersecurity, are major drivers of sentiment or trader sentiment and investor behavior. Artificial intelligence, as I'm sure you're all aware, has been a huge focus for traders in 2024, generating a lot of headlines and gains for the Nasdaq 100 and its constituent companies. Now, has this created a bubble in the index, as some analysts have said, or will it have a huge positive influence on future company earnings, which could see the index continue to move higher? This all remains to be seen. Now, the final category to consider are the earnings reports of individual companies within the Nasdaq 100. The financial performance of companies within the Nasdaq 100 has a significant impact on its movement. Usually, positive earnings surprises, which are results that exceed market expectations, can boost the stock prices of those individual companies, thereby pushing the index higher, while disappointing earnings can have the opposite effect. Forward guidance on future company earnings and the economic climate these companies are operating in, provided by company CEOs and top-level management during earnings calls, can also influence investor expectations and consequently those share prices and the price of the index. Now, earnings reporting season happens every 3 months or a quarter. You can check out when the most recent individual Nasdaq 100 company earnings are due using your Plus500 platform by clicking Menu, Tools, Economic Calendar, and then Corporate Events. If you click on the funnel and uncheck the dividends box, this will show you all the earnings for individual companies for any given period of your choosing. If you want to know what company is reporting on a certain date, then click the calendar, pick your date, and all the companies reporting their earnings for that day will be listed. Now, that's the basic categories. I should say there are more detailed considerations that traders and investors use to analyze and predict movements in the Nasdaq 100 index, CFD, but that is a deeper discussion for a different webinar. What this does mean is that these factors together create an environment where the Nasdaq 100 can experience significant volatility driven by the interplay of macroeconomic trends, sector-specific developments, and the performance of its largest constituents. So with that in mind, let's move on and consider volatility within the Nasdaq 100. Now, the best and recent example showcasing how this volatility can hit at any time is at the end of July and start of August. If we look at the plus 500 chart for this period, now the Nasdaq 100 index had only just hit another all-time high at 20,982 on July the 10th. And this was supported by hype around artificial intelligence and renewed hopes for interest rate cuts from the Fed as US inflation had continued to slow. Then, within 2 days, the index had slipped from 19,593, which was its open on July the 31st, to a low of 17,354 on Monday, August the 5th, as panic set into markets. That's a fall of 11.5%. Why? Because two weaker than expected US economic growth readings sparked concerns that the US economy was going to go into a recession. This saw a rush for the exit on popular trades like long Magnificent Seven stocks, especially Nvidia, as well as some of the other AI-related shares that have been performing so well in 2024. Then, just as quickly as the sell-off began, everything changed. This time, a stronger than expected ISM Services PMI release on Monday, August the 5th, calmed trader nerves and the upside reversal began. By the end of the week, the Nasdaq 100 had already jumped 7%, from its Monday lows, with a close at 18,601. And by the end of August, the index was trading right back where it started at 19,594. Which was a rally of 13% in just 3 weeks. So as you can see from this example, these types of moves create many trading opportunities, but they also create risks. So let's take a look at some of the things you can do to navigate these volatile markets and give yourself the best opportunity to trade with a successful outcome. The first thing you should do is stay informed. Monitor macroeconomic indicators that can influence market sentiment, like interest rates, inflation, and employment data. Keep up with news affecting Nasdaq 100 companies, such as earnings reports, regulatory changes, and technological advancements. Now, and remember, I laid out how you can access these events on the Plus500 platform earlier in the webinar. You can also follow reputable news outlets like Bloomberg, Reuters, and CNBC, who all provide free and also paid analysis that can help you to keep updated on key topics impacting the Nasdaq 100 index. The second thing for you to consider is a stop loss order. There are two types that you can utilize. The first is a fixed stop loss order. This is an order you can enter in advance on the Plus500 platform to close a position at a defined price level that you have planned for, which limits any loss in the event of an unfavorable move in the Nasdaq 100 index. The second type of order is a trailing stop loss order. Instead of remaining at a fixed price level like the previous example, this type of stop loss order follows behind the price of the index by a certain number of pips that you set in advance when you're entering the order into the Plus500 platform. So when the index moves in a favorable direction, this helps you to lock in gains. This is especially good when the Nasdaq 100 is trending in a certain direction. And then when the price of the index turns against you, it executes the stop loss at a more advantageous level. However, it must be said that if you set this trailing stop order too close, or even the fixed order too close, you could be stopped out on an intraday pullback before the move you were looking for happens. So careful consideration needs to be given to the levels or number of pips away that you choose for these stop loss orders. The next thing to consider is using take profit orders. A take profit order is a different type of order you can enter in advance to close a position at a defined price level you have planned for to profit from a favorable move in the Nasdaq 100 index. When the index can reverse direction quickly, as we saw in the earlier example that I showed, placing these orders on the Plus500 system ahead of time can mean you are executed while you're working, sleeping, or away from your desk. So it's an order that's well worth utilizing. The fourth consideration is employing technical analysis techniques. This is utilizing the price charts of the Nasdaq 100 and indicators available on the Plus500 system to help you identify areas for trade entry and where to place stop loss and take profit orders. These charts can also help you to gauge market sentiment by showing the direction a market is going into key events or economic data releases to help you identify when trader positions have built up one way in one direction, and where, if expectations aren't met, the index may reverse direction as traders look to quickly exit positions. I regularly use support and resistance techniques and Bollinger Band indicators in my day-to-day trading. Bollinger Bands are especially useful in highlighting when markets are becoming more volatile by showing the way the Nasdaq 100 is trending and then helping to identify when that trend may accelerate in either direction. We recently did a 15-minute webinar focused specifically on how you can use these technical analysis techniques and also Fibonacci retracements to assist your trading. I would suggest you watch this webinar if you're considering using technical analysis techniques, as it lays out how to utilize them in a more practical way. Now, the final thing for you to consider is risk management. When markets are becoming more volatile, position sizing becomes more important. Consider reducing your position size to accommodate wider stop loss and take profit order parameters. Limit the size of individual trades to a smaller percentage of your total capital, reducing the impact that single trade may have on your ability to continue trading on any other given day. Okay, right. Hopefully that helped provide you with some things to consider when navigating these volatile markets. Let's move on and run through the case study. Now, this case study is focused on providing an example of how you could have traded the Nasdaq 100 index CFD and risk managed a live position around the NVIDIA Q2 earnings, which were released after the market close on August the 28th. The trade idea formulating is that after such a strong rally in the Nasdaq 100 index from the lows at 17,354 on August the 5th, up to a high of 19,844 on Monday, August the 26th, that the market is a little overextended into such an important set of numbers from the third biggest company in the index. If I'm correct in this assumption, there should be some sort of sell-off in the Nasdaq 100 if traders are disappointed in any way with the results that NVIDIA puts out, and there could be a rush to sell out of those long positions in NVIDIA, impacting sentiment and the direction of the Nasdaq 100. So I want to execute a sell, if possible, to enter a short position and potentially benefit from a move lower in the index. First, I need to stay informed. I know the NVIDIA results are out after the market close on Wednesday, August the 28th, as I've checked the corporate events calendar on the Plus500 system. Next, I want to utilize some technical analysis techniques and risk management tools available on the Plus500 platform to identify some levels to trade against and to protect my position if my trade idea was incorrect and the trade moves against me. Using a 1 hour chart, I can see that the high of the week so far is 19,842 on Monday, August the 26th, from which the market sells off to a low of 19,441 on Tuesday, August the 27th, before bouncing again. Now, I have identified two things. The bullish sentiment of the previous 3 weeks has started to cool ahead of the NVIDIA earnings release, and I have found the resistance level at 19,842, a level that stopped buying on a previous occasion and a level I hope will hold further buying on any other moves higher. If I expect the Nasdaq 100 to sell off before or over the NVIDIA numbers, this could be a good potential opportunity to sell with a defined level above which I know I'm wrong and will be happy to exit the trade. So on Wednesday, the 28th of August, the Nasdaq 100 trades back to 19,689. So step one, I sell at 19,670. Now, I realize this could be a volatile period, so I reduce my usual position trade size to accommodate a stop loss to protect my position on the top side if the trade goes against me at 19,870. Just above that high at 19,842 from Monday. I set this stop loss order on the Plus500 system. Step two, next I want to assess viable take profit levels for my live position if I'm correct and the index does move lower. Here, because I expect the market to be more volatile, I decide to use the Bollinger Bands indicator on the Plus500 platform to help me as I observe the index throughout my trade. I identify a key support level at the Bollinger mid-average around 19,635, which is this line in the middle that you can see on screen now between the upper and lower Bollinger Band. If that key level breaks on a closing hourly basis, I would expect the index to continue lower, especially if the Bollinger Bands, the upper and lower band, continue to widen, indicating a pickup in volatility. Now, as you can see, as this trade plays out, the Nasdaq 100 breaks and closes below the Bollinger mid-average. The Bollinger Bands widen as volatility increases, and the Nasdaq 100 price tags that lower Bollinger Band over the next several hours as it falls into the market close. It then continues lower after the Nvidia results, which, although are still very strong, they aren't what traders were hoping for. The Nasdaq 100 prints a low at 19,140 before bouncing. So here I decide I have two options that I can consider for this live trade. Option one, I can take profit, exit the position and move on to another trade. Or option two, I can bring my stop loss down to the 1 hour chart Bollinger Band mid-average level, which has now moved lower, and you can see this on screen now, as it traces out the trend lower in the Nasdaq 100 index over the previous 8 hours. If I had chosen option two, I would have been stopped out for a profit at 19,370 when the index breaks back above the Bollinger mid-average, as you can see on screen. Now, to be clear, this isn't investment advice, but just one example of how you could have traded the Nasdaq 100 Index CFD on the Plus500 platform over last month's Nvidia earnings report. Now, I can see that there are many questions, but I just wanted to look forward and focus on one event later this week that is going to have huge significance on the direction of the Nasdaq 100 Index as we move through the rest of September. The Federal Reserve interest rate decision is on Wednesday at 1900 British Standard Time, or BST for short, and that is followed by the press conference of Fed Chairman Jerome Powell at 1930 BST. Now, traders are expecting a rate cut of at least 25 basis points, but the Fed may go with a jumbo 50 basis points cut, which could well spook the market into thinking the Fed believe they are behind the curve in cutting interest rates to support a slowing US economy and are worried about a recession. If that were the case, it could increase Nasdaq 100 volatility. Also, traders are unsure of what comes next from the Fed in terms of interest rates as we move through the rest of 2024. Current expectations for another 3 25 basis points cuts at each of the remaining 3 interest rate decisions in October, November, and December. However, that may not be the case. So what Chairman Powell says at the press conference regarding future rate cuts, inflation, and the growth rate of the US economy will have a huge influence on where the index moves next. It could and should be a very interesting and busy period for trading the Nasdaq 100 index that could well set the tone of sentiment towards US stocks for the rest of 2024. With that in mind, let's move on to the questions.